Hello, this is Idodmg and welcome back to the channel. In this Dragonkin the Banished video, I want to talk to you about some tips and tricks that I wanted to share with you all. Let's go ahead and jump in and talk Dragonkin the Banished. Went ahead and jumped into the game right away, and this very first one here is your settings. When you very first fire up Dragonkin, your interface setting has a game view type, and by default it will be set to this camera mode right here called action. It's zoomed in, and yeah, I recommend going in here immediately and changing from action to classic. You can see it changes the angle, and you can also see more of the battlefield as well. Definitely want to do that. Next up, I want to go ahead and touch a little bit here on your wormling abilities. Now, these abilities, in order for them to actually function, have to be touching one of your active abilities. But what I want to point out here is when you're deciding what wormling abilities to use, make sure you pay attention to the wording. So this one here, Redemption of the Damned. So this is whenever you kill an enemy, you have a chance to summon an ally. So whenever you kill an enemy is going to be what procs this. Now compare that to when inflicting damage. And the big point here I wanted to make is there's upon activation. Now the upon activation and when inflicting damage are obviously very different. While you're inflicting damage can happen a whole bunch, whereas the upon activation is literally when you hit the skill for the first time. So if you're using a basic ability, for example, and you click, that'll activate the skill and it'll use the wormling ability. But if you hold it down and continue casting it, it will not continue casting that wormling ability until you let go of the click and then click again to reactivate it. That's why it's important to know that when you're dealing damage, it's going to be happening. So if you click and hold it down and you're dealing damage, the wormling ability will be happening there. You also have another one that's when an enemy is afflicted with crowd control. And there's different things here. Obviously, just make sure you read the tooltips. I think it's kind of common sense, but it was something I noticed while I was playing through, and I just wanted to share it with you. Next up, I wanted to talk about symbiosis, and if you're new to Dragonkin, maybe you're lower level, you may not know about this. If you've played for a while, you probably are aware. Your skills can enter symbiosis when you have 8 modifiers active on the ability. Now remember, so it doesn't have to be directly touching the skill hexagon here. It can be touching any part of the skill cluster. So even these modifiers that are touching this modifier, granted this is not the skill, this is a modifier, right? This is the skill hexagon. This is the modifier hexagon. But these two are connected, so it still counts even though it's touching the modifier instead of the skill. But once you have 8 modifiers activated this way, it will enter symbiosis. And you know that that's active when it's all glowy like this. You can scroll down and there at the bottom, it'll tell you symbiosis is active as well. But the reason I wanted to point this out in the video is because this is going to make it so that when you use your ability, it's going to also use your wormling's element. So I have the fire wormling, and if we use my ability, you can see the explosion there also does fire. Now this is important because on our gear, we can look for lightning damage, and we can also benefit from fire damage as well. So it's a nice way to be able to double dip and get different types of damage bonuses. And this is really going to be important when you're hunting for the legendary talents and trying to find good rolls on those legendary items. We'll talk a little bit more about itemization later in the video. For now, I want to go ahead and show you another quick little one. This one's pretty good to know here. And this is going to be with your map overlay. And again, this one may be obvious to you, but here it is. You can hit tab, obviously, to open up your map overlay once the game loads. Here we go. Now, you're like, dude, you can pan around with your arrow keys on your keyboard, right? That's pretty cool. But you can zoom this bad boy out pretty far, and you can see more of it. So just remember, you can zoom this thing out. Well, the one thing I haven't figured out, I'd like to know, is how to zoom out this mini-map. So if anyone knows how, let me know down in the comments how to zoom out this mini-map. But there's your overlay. You can zoom in and out on it. Pretty awesome to know. Now, this next piece of advice I have for you is aimed towards new players. And it is to start off with Barbarian if it's your very first class. And the reason I recommend this is because Barbarian is one of the most polished classes in the game. It's more fun than the other classes, in my opinion. And also we have the numbers to back it up as well on the Dragonkin Discord. If it's your first time playing, make sure you run the Barbarian class to enjoy the game and have more fun. Now, if you're like, no, I hate barbarians, I'm not taking this dude's advice, that's okay, and that I totally respect that. but I'm just going to let you know the Oracle is a little bit more slower and a little bit more of a slog, especially in early levels. Around level 25 or 30, it does pick up a little bit there. But the Barbarian's the most polished, the most fun, the most fluid. And the Knight is okay as well, but I'm currently playing the Oracle, and I'm having a decent time, but the very beginning was a little bit boring. And if you checked out my review video, make sure you check it out at the end of this video if you haven't seen it yet. But I talk a little bit about that in there as well and how that kind of impacted my time with the game, at least in the beginning. Next up, I wanted to point this out, and this is a big shout out to DMGCREW community member Disaster for pointing this one out to me. You can actually skip the story and go straight to the end game as soon as you boot up the game. You can even take it one step further, and when you start the game up for the very first time, you're going to be in the prologue, and you can actually hit escape and skip it. But beyond that, here's how you skip to the end game. If you don't want to do the story, you can come into here and you can create a character, click on new group, and you're going to click end game. You can skip straight to the end game if you want to, or you can do story and prologue if you want to. Now, these groups are tied into your city. It might seem confusing if you haven't played the game, but once you kind of check out this interface, it'll make sense pretty quickly to you. Now, you may be wondering, should I skip the story or should I do the story on my first playthrough? And it is entirely up to you. You're not going to really miss anything if you do decide to skip to the end game. All the story bosses and everything, you'll re-encounter them in the world, the maps, everything you'll re-encounter in the end game as well. But the only reason I would say maybe you would want to do story is just to kind of get that feeling of the world and stuff like that. But I think skipping to the end game is a good thing to do as well. So it's entirely up to you, and I just want to make sure you know that that option is available. And that is how you do it. You'll create your character, and you'll be instantly in the end game. One other note on skipping to the end game: if you choose to do that, your character will be level 3, and you can start distributing your points. But if it's your first time playing, you won't have this many points. You'll have to actually level up your city in order to unlock those bonus attribute points. Maybe in the future I'll do a big whole city deep dive, but in this video, let's keep it moving here with some more tips and tricks. Switch back over to my main character here for the next one, and this is going to be for materials. This is going to be really important, especially if you're trying to craft your Wormlings armor sets. There's currently 4 different armor sets in the game, and they require some hefty materials that you may have to end up target farming. And here's how you do it. You just check on what you need. You click the plus sign, and you can see which materials you have to have in order to craft the gear. Pretty straightforward, I think, there. But now, how do you know where these materials drop? Well, you open up your inventory, and since these are kind of grayed out, it's kind of hard to tell. So we're going to show you just for clarity's sake here. You can see they're different colored materials and resources, and the colors are important. The gray color is from the plains, the green is from the swamps and jungles, blue is from islands and underwater levels, and red is currently not a resource that you can actually go and target farm in the game because the biomes aren't out yet. So I asked the developers, what's up with that? How do I get them? Because some of them are used actually to craft that armor. And in fact, these red ones you can find from end game chests. So best of luck to you on that hunt. But this is important to know because when you're in the end game doing hunts, once you've progressed through your board a little bit here, you've unlocked some new biomes, you can do a chaos hunt, and you can actually come into here. I'll go ahead and abandon my hunt just for the sake of this video, but you can actually choose what biomes. So if I wanted to find some blue materials, I could set it to island and ocean biomes and target farm those. Then same with green, swamp, and jungle. I'm still progressing through the board hunts here, though, to unlock the last set of biomes and stuff like that. Perhaps in the future we'll do an end game deep dive, but basically you have your board hunts for permanent upgrades, and these are going to unlock different things that you can use for your chaos hunts, and then you can also unlock augments, which are buffs for your hunts as well. We'll probably do more of a deep dive later down the track, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't yet for more of those videos to come. The other thing I wanted to point out here with materials is there is a difference here. You have materials, but you also have resources. Materials are dropped from enemies, and resources are obtained from resource nodes out in the world that you're going through. And just remember, you tie that into the biome, and there you go. You have the information to target farm the materials you need for all of your crafting needs. Next up, I wanted to go ahead and talk about item rarities. So there's different rarities in the game. You have white items are common, and then it goes to blue, which are uncommon, and then it goes to green, which are rare, and then it goes to orange, which are legendary, and then it goes to yellows, which are mythic. Now, those are all the different rarities in the game, but on top of that, any of these rarities can actually roll as a draconic item or a divine item, and these are going to add even more bonuses to these items. Now, over on your skill hexagons, and I have a video talking about the whole skill system here. It's the one called Avoid This Mistake. Make sure you check it out after this video and after the review video. But these have rarities. Now, the modifiers have different rarities, but the skills, however, do not. So it's just the modifiers. You can see I have a legendary repulsion here, a rare practice makes perfect modifier, and an uncommon AoE, greater AoE here. So modifiers can roll rarities, skills, however, cannot. And as far as I'm aware, the skill modifiers, with the Draconic and Divine, I don't think they can, but they can roll all the way up to actually mythic modifiers as well. One more thing to point out here when it comes to rarities, Draconic and Divine, is some of these are tied behind which difficulty you're playing on. You can see if you're playing on easy or medium, nothing really special, but once you get to hard, you can get access to Draconic equipment. Now, this doesn't mean they're going to drop, but you do have to have your character be level 20 in order for Draconic equipment to start dropping. So if you're struggling with the game and you're under level 20, don't stress too much about missing out on that. They cannot drop till you're level 20 as far as I'm aware. And on top of that, they're incredibly rare. But obviously, the higher difficulty you can do, the better. You're going to get more loot, gold, XP, all that stuff. So Draconic equipment unlocks at hard, character level 20. And then once you get into Desolation 1, you unlock access to mythical items. Now, this is a little bit misleading because you do have to be character level 45 for these mythical items to even drop. That's how it was in the demo, and I believe that's how it still is. You can correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments. But as far as I'm aware, you do have to be level 45 to even see mythical items drop. Now, beyond that, you work through your hard, very hard, extreme, Desolation 1 through 5. And then you can get to the highest difficulty that's in the current early access version of the game called Calamity 1. And this is where you will start to see those divine items that we talk about. So divine items do not drop on difficulties below Calamity. So you got to be on Calamity 1 to even be able to see those types of items. Last but not least here, and I'm trying to keep this video straight and to the point for you, but I know I like to just talk about video games a lot. But anyway, the last one here for you, and I actually made a video about this because I just couldn't wait for the tips and tricks. It was such a mind-blowing thing for me. But what it is your grid system. These tabs are going to fill up. These are your inventory slots. And these grids are where you actually align your skills, right? Now in the background, you can actually use this as extra inventory space. There's 50 floating fragment slots here. Now the tip and trick I want to point out here is if you have a cluster, so this is 5 slots that's being used in my hexagon inventory. Sorry, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 slots are being used right now. Now, if I decide to float this, that only uses up 1 float slot. So you may be wise if inventory is an issue, and it will be the more you play. You maybe want to put the bigger clusters that you want to hold onto into your floats instead of in your inventory. I hope they add a shared stash or even a personal stash for these hexagons, but as of now, they're not really in the game. That the floating fragments is kind of the closest thing we have to that. And that's going to wrap it up for this Dragonkin the Banished tips and tricks video. Hopefully you found this video useful and or entertaining. If so, don't forget that like button and subscribe to the channel if you think I've earned it. Please consider becoming a YouTube channel member today. The support means the world to the family eye. You also unlock some pretty fun perks, such as behind the scenes, bloopers when I find them while editing videos, and early access to videos when I release a whole big batch. I also recently started doing a little mini podcast that is a member-only item there, and it's just something I sit down in front of the camera for a little bit while I work on the beard and talk about video games. I'm dubbing it the Beard Chat with Idodmg. So consider picking up a membership and checking that out. It's very therapeutic for me, and it looks like our current members are enjoying that content as well. But don't forget, your view alone means the absolute world. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.